All right, there we go. I'm really trying my best to make the opening of this video not look like a forced confession of a POW. I'm not sure if I'm succeeding, but I figure it'd be better to do, face-to-face with the opening than do it on the bench. I don't know. It seems like that would be better. I even got my RGBs lit up on my bench, so I look like a real YouTuber. So we'll see how it turns out. If not, I'll just re-record it and you'll never see this. But getting into it, my previous video, the one before this one, I was just basically demonstrating my hobby, flying my drones around, kind of giving a brief example of what it's all about. And this particular drone, I mentioned it in the video, was having problems. Whenever I would do a flip, or actually it would be a roll like this, it would just spiral down to the ground. It would start rolling and then it would just go out of control. Just going to take it home and fix it real quick because I thought it was the motor controller board that was the problem, which is usually the problem when that happens, but it actually turned out to be a motor. Now, motors are fairly easy to fix and they're fairly easy to film fixing, and I figured this might be a good opportunity to give a little how-to quickie on soldering. And it's a good skill to have. I know as a mechanic I use it every once in a while. My hobby, obviously, I use it a lot. And yeah, little tips, tricks, and things I've picked up to make life a little bit easier, to stuff I use and things of that nature. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, before we get started, let me just kind of give you an idea of what's going on here. But what we have here, these are these four motors. These are actually three-phase motors, which is kind of cool to have a three-phase motor that small. The only main difference of these motors that you wouldn't see in another one in a traditional three-phase motor is that the magnets are on the outside of the windings instead of being on the inside. That's why we call these outrunner motors insteed of in-runner motors. The flight controller is down inside here, and then you got the motor speed controller, which is all the way down inside here. Basically what happens is the sticks, when I move the sticks, you get a signal up to these two antennas right here. Flight controller takes what the sticks is doing, figures out with some algorithm bullshit, tells the motor speed controllers to speed up or slow down the motors, and that's how you basically fly with these things. So basically what's happening is when I'm doing a roll like this, these motors speed up, these motors slow down until I stop my stick input, and then the flight controller says, okay, it doesn't want to roll anymore, and it stops. So to keep me from continuously rolling, these motors will actually speed up briefly, and these motors will slow down. And then once I let go of the stick, it goes back to idle, and I'm sitting in there hovering. So what's happening is when I'm rolling, these slow down, these speed up, and then when I stop moving the stick, these get a quick spike, and this motor right here is screwed up, so the motor controller, ESC, doesn't know what to do with that, and that's because one of the windings is bad inside this motor. So what it does when it doesn't know what to do, it just shuts off, and then I flop out of the sky. So let me get some tools together, and I will start picking and pulling this apart. I'll actually pull this motor apart so you can kind of see what the actual windings look like in there, because it's kind of hard to see with the bell on. So let's go do that. All right, so let's start off by cutting off the speed tape. All right, there we go. Now, these right here, these they originally came out as a thing called race wire. It's just a printed circuit board, and basically it acts as a wire extension. So if your wires off the motor out of the box aren't long enough, you can bring them up the air. Plus, they're also nice because they protect the wires from getting cut if the props ever hit them. So there's that. All right, so now take the screws out of the bottom of the motor. These little things down here, these are just little skid plates. They kind of protect the carbon a little bit, not too much. There. All right. Now I kind of want to see which way these wires hook up to this. Three-phase motors, if you switch any two wires, the motor will spin in the opposite direction. So what I want to do is make sure I hook it up the way I took it apart, so I don't have to either swap a wire or go into the programming for this and actually physically change the rotation of the motor. It just makes it easier. You don't have to do this, but that's the way I do it. So that's the connection, and the motor. This one goes over here, right? Let's make sure we do that right. That one goes over there. And that one goes over there. So they're swapped. And then the middle goes to the middle. All right, let's get that out of the way. Now I'm going to fire up the soldering iron. So this soldering station, people always ask me when I do videos about this. Basically, I've had this thing for 100 years, well, probably 3 or 4 years, and I've used it a lot. I believe it was Big Clive that actually did a review on this, and it's getting hot, and he seemed to think it was all right. It's actually a soldering station and a heat gun all in one. It's a two-in-one type deal. But yeah, I saw that on his channel. I bought it because, I mean, he is kind of the guru of electronics there. And yeah, it's done me well ever since. I keep it in my direct me link all the time. I'll put that in the thing if you're looking to get one. And yeah, like I said, I recommend it. I've had it for the longest time. This is actually, I think, the original tip I got with this. So, I mean, the tip, I mean, I don't want to stand by the tips because usually that's how they save money. But this one I got with it actually has been holding up pretty well. And I got probably a half dozen extra ones that I'll probably never use because, like I said, this one I've gotten 4 years out of it. But I also take pretty good care of it. I also have in my direct link, this is brass wool, and it's just good for cleaning the tip off when you're using it. I'll put a little fresh solder on there, and I'll grab this one in the middle because it's the easiest one to get to. And we'll just pull it off, then we'll pull its neighbor off, and then we'll pull the guy on the other side off. There we go. Nice thing about that soldering iron too is that if you leave it sit for a certain amount of minutes, I can't remember how long, but it actually goes down to like a cool down mode where it will not overheat itself sitting there. It goes down to like 100 degrees Celsius. And for this type of stuff, just in case you were wondering, I usually run it at around 350 to 400 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to try to get this apart just so I give you guys a good look at what's going on in here. If the screw will come out. Is that whole thing spinning? I think the whole shaft is spinning. I might not be able to get it apart. Let me grab something. That might work. Yep, there we go. It's a good thing this thing's fucking wasted. Alright, so get the screw out of the bottom. I'll probably actually keep this bell because it's actually not even bent that bad. I mean, it's not in good shape, but it's in better shape than one that's completely destroyed. Pull that out. And down here, these are where the magnets are. I think they're N52 magnets. I'm pretty sure they're actually N52 magnets, but they're pretty strong magnets. And here is our actual problem. Let me get this pencil so we can see it. Look down in here. You can see those windings. Actually, I'll pull them out. See, the windings got cut. And that was probably from a crash. I probably hit something when I was crashing, and this bell kind of kicked over while it was spinning and chopped the windings up. So that's the issue. All right, let me go grab my replacement motor and we'll start going with that. All right, so we got the motor. Razor blade isn't very razor bladey. There you go. All right, so I like to start off with just kind of dry fitting it to get the length of the wires correct. Not permanent, just kind of so I could eyeball it, you know what I'm saying? So I go a little bit long. That way there, I am completely blocking the camera, aren't I? Yeah, I go a little bit long. And another thing a lot of people do, kind of a mistake when you're putting these motors in, is that you don't want to make everything too tight. So if you do accidentally break an arm, you don't want your motor wires to be the only thing holding it together. It's better to break the arm and just let the thing flop in the breeze than to worry about your motor arms having to take all that extra shock, if you know what I'm saying. So that's pretty good right there. I'm going to trim these back in a little bit, but that's about where I want them. So I'm going to take this off. Let's put this to the side. Right, that, and take my strippers. I want to strip these a little long, and I'm going to crop them once I get done. And my cat's scratching at the door. So we'll twist these. And this is just helping hands, is what they call them. Kind of a cheap set I got. I always intend to upgrade these to something nicer, but I never think about it. And I just have heat shrink over the alligator clips just because I don't want it to get a, whatchamacallit, I don't want to cut the wires is what I'm getting at. So now we got no clean liquid flux, which I prefer over everything. It doesn't leave a greasy mess behind. And probably the most important thing you'll take out of this video is the right kind of solder to use. This is 60-40, actually 63-37. It's 60-40 lead tin solder. Lead-free solder, it does work, because every time I tell people to use this stuff, they say they can solder good with lead-free, and it does work. I mean, I could probably beat myself off with my feet, but I'd rather just use my hand because it's easier. And the reason this stuff is easier is because it's got a lower melting temperature. So if you're soldering wires, it probably doesn't make much of a difference because you can just heat it up. But if you're doing something like a printed circuit board, you get that too hot, you start pulling pads off. So, and this stuff just works better. Anybody who's done a lot of soldering will tell you that the lead solder is so much better than the lead-free stuff. So we'll come over here, and we're just going to tin these up just to make them a little easier to live with. Now, that little puff of smoke you just see right there that's coming up into the camera, that is not lead. A lot of people think that. Basically, it is just the flux burning off. And the flux is basically pine cone resin. And yeah, I mean, it's no more dangerous for you than standing by a campfire. I mean, if I was doing this 8 hours a day, yeah, I'd probably have a little exhaust fan to keep the smoke out of my face. But for, you know, a couple of minutes here and there, I'm not too concerned about it. All right, let's bring the drone back into the picture here. And what I want to do is try to remove some of the old solder. I'm trying really hard to say solder right, by the way. Basically, everyone calls me on it and says that I say solder, which I do, but I know how to say it right. I just can't get it through my brain to do so. Right, so we got the majority of that off. Let's tin it with a little bit of fresh stuff, just because it makes things work a little easier. And hit it with the flux. This is very important. If you're using this and you're doing any kind of soldering, you should always use flux. It just makes everything flow so much nicer and gives you nicer joints. All right, so let's put the motor back on. Let's kind of see if we got everything about where we want it. Yeah, that'll work. Checking my alignment here. I only run 2 bolts in these because it's all you really need. Kind of saves you a little bit of weight. I've never had a problem running 2 bolts. Some people like to use 4. Some people like to run 3 for some reason. But yeah, 2's always worked for me. So hopefully I'm getting this on camera. It's kind of hard to line all this shit up and excuse my reach there. Another thing too, a lot of people like to use Loctite on their motors, and which is fine. And sometimes it's kind of hard to remove, and I'm just in a pretty good habit of coming back and checking these every once in a while just to make sure. And while I'm talking about it, I will check these when I'm done off camera, just to make sure they're still tight. So according to our diagram right here, middle one goes in the middle, and then 2 end ones cross over each other. So let's crop these down. And the reason I went long when I soldered these is because it's just easier to solder longer wires, and then you get a good tinning on them. And then once you get them tinned, you can crop them down, and then they don't fray apart. Because you kind of want these short, because you don't want to be sorry, kind of losing my train of thought here. Yeah, you want these short because you don't want them touching each other. So good set of tweezers is nice. Always clean your iron before you go soldering stuff. And then we get it, let it flow, and that needs a little bit more solder. So in this case, because I got to hold it, I'll just kind of load the tip up. That's usually not the best way to do it, but I mean, sometimes it's the easiest way to do it. There you go, that looks a lot better. So again, crop it, and then we'll stick it in there. All right, there we go. All right, so we got the motors all hooked back up. We used our little cheat sheet. This should be spinning in the right direction, but let's just make sure because it's easier to fix it here than it is when I'm out flying. So let's plug her in. No smoke, that's a good thing. And I'm actually hooked up to a current limiting power supply over here off camera. And that's just where I'm getting my voltage from. It's easier to do it on the bench, and it's actually, I could turn the current down on it. So if I'm testing something and I have a short, it'll trip the voltage off of that thing before it lets this thing catch on fire. It's saved my butt a few times. So let's hit the arm switch. Those are spinning. Those are spinning in the right direction. There you go. Everything looks normal. Now, the reason you're worried about direction, as far as the way the motors spin, the front ones spin this direction, and the rear ones spin this direction. And that's basically just for yaw stability. If they were all spinning in the same direction, it would spin in the opposite direction that all the propellers were spinning. So it gives you yaw stability, so it wants to stay straight, and it also gives you yaw control, so you can rotate on the on axis there. So we got our speed tape off the camera here, so I will wrap that up real quick. And in case you were wondering too, you know what, I'm just thinking about it. Underneath here, I have some heavy double-sided sticky tape, which insulates these wires from shorting out onto the carbon fiber frame. And this tape isn't really necessary. It's just kind of there for appearance. As you can see, it's color-coded with the rest of the drone. But it is kind of nice. You know, it keeps water not out of it, but like if you hit some dew or something like that and you get a drop, it'll probably not be a good day if you get a drop that arcs out that motor connection. So like I said, it's not really too functional, but it's nice to have. Put that on and stick on the prop nut, and we're good to go. Won't be able to test it here because my house isn't that big, but I'm pretty sure we're good. All right, well, back here on hostage cam. Yeah, so little sneak peek in soldering. Little sneak peek on how these things actually fly and what the motors do to control it. And yeah, as far as the soldering end goes of it, again, I'll link my station. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, in my direct me link. It's the one I've used for years. Hasn't failed me. It's a little over $60. So, I mean, it's kind of cheap compared to the other ones, but like the Heiko ones that I mean, they're really nice, but I mean, for a hobbyist, they work great. And like I said, usually my direct me link thing is stuff that I've used and I know it's good. And people always ask me about it, so I just set it up inside there. But yeah, so like I said, soldering's a good little thing to keep in your toolbox. And you do fun stuff like this little Christmas tree I put together years ago. I also got this here multicolored pyramid thing I soldered together. Has a little IC chip on it. This was pretty complicated because you had to do all that crap. And then I had this here DIY oscilloscope, which kind of works, really doesn't, but it was nice. There's a lot of components in there. I mean, you can see all the pins in the back you have to solder into the thing. And yeah, it's a fun little project. But yeah, so I highly recommend, if you have any kind of use for it whatsoever, to pick it up and give it a try. They also sell, now that I'm thinking about it, they have printed circuit boards with nothing on them aside from pads. So if you want to practice soldering on something like that, you just get a bunch of wire and then just practice soldering to the pads. Again, the biggest thing I've found that people make mistakes with is, one, they don't use flux. And that No Clean liquid flux is probably the best I've ever used. Well, not that particular brand, but that that type of flux is the best I've ever used. And the lead solder, not lead-free solder. Lead solder just makes life a whole lot easier. I know a lot of people are nervous about using lead or touching lead, but I mean, as far as touching it, clean your hands when you're done, and don't eat it, and you'll be good. So, yeah, I think that's about it. Any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll address them in there, or make another video if it's a good enough question. And as far as the channel goes, I got a couple tool reviews coming up that I'm thinking about doing. I always got shit floating around in my head for video ideas. I'm kind of a buckshot of randomness when it comes to my videos lately. And yeah, so I'll see you next time.